Great. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you all for being here. So these are the first of 4 presentations for the RFP P-19-027 UTC Corridor Transit-Oriented Development. Just to go over a few housekeeping items before we start. Emergency exits, we have 2 out this door here. There's one immediately to your right, and then there's one past the elevators on the right. We have women's and men's restrooms out here as well, and water fountains on the far side if you need it. We also have an emergency exit out the back door. You just follow the hallway back to the back corner of the building, and we can exit the stairwell there. Safety message for this month. Get my cheat sheet. When you gamble with safety, you bet your life. We are just very big on safety here, so keep that in mind. So, like I said, these are interviews. I know you guys are prepared to go through each question with some sort of graphic or presentation, but I'm also opening this up. We can dialogue back and forth, ask questions of each other. We can also interrupt and ask questions as we go along. We'll go through introductions and then we'll get started. So my name is John Burdine. I'm a contracts and procurement specialist with the JTA. And then I'll just have you guys introduce yourselves, and then we'll go through the Haskell team as well.
Perfect. My name is Carolyn Allen Smith. I'm a contracts procurement specialist for JTA.
Good morning. My name is Kendra Burton. I'm the financial plan and analysis manager.
Good morning, Zan Traversa, JTA, Planning and System Development, and I handle the planning side of DoD.
Hi, Alicia Batson. I'm Senior Manager in External Affairs.
Cleveland Ferguson, CAO.
Richard Clark, Capital Resource Officer.
And Andre Wallace, President, Jack Sure State Partnership.
Chris Massachusetts. Well, good morning. I'll just start. I'm Chris Flagg. I'm Project Manager for the Haskell team.
I'm Cantrice Jones with the QD Design Group.
Mikhail Alert, Haskell.
Lisa Nissenson, WGI.
Javier Arguello, Michael Baker International.
I'm Victor Dover, Town Planner with Dover Cole & Partners.
Great, thank you. And just as a reminder, if we could all speak up when you talk, we've got these 2 microphones here. That way we can get it on the recording. So with that, we'll go ahead and start. It's 9:05 and we've got 2 hours. 9:06.
Well, John, thank you very much, and thank you very much for giving us this tremendous opportunity to be before you this morning. We have a dynamic team. We have an exciting team. We have an exciting opportunity. And wow, 2 hours. You think that's a lot of time? Just wait till the end of 2 hours and see how much information we've had the opportunity to show you, and it goes by pretty quick. So again, thank you so much for that. To reintroduce myself, Chris Flagg. I'll be the project manager for this esteemed team. You'll be hearing from them. You'll be hearing about them. You'll be seeing some of the certainly some of the resources they bring to the table. It's extremely important for us to know that we have the best at your fingertips. We have the best team assembled for a project of this magnitude, a project of this importance, and really one that's transformational for the city of Jackson. You know, when you think about a team, what comes to mind? Certainly everybody talks innovation. We want to prove to you the fact that all of us adore innovation. We adore the thought. We live for the opportunity to be creative, to be innovative. We have to be extremely agile as well. As a team, we have to be flexible. We have to demonstrate agility. We have to know when to push, when to pull. We do it as a team. We do it as a unit with you, and we look forward to that challenge as well. Certainly, great plans start with the community input and the stakeholder input. You cannot have any successful plan without integral community involvement. So you'll hear from our community engagement folks as well to ensure that everyone has a voice, and every voice is important. We have to listen. We have to have that ability to hear. The saying of wise people have big ears. Let's listen first. Let's understand where the concerns are from the community side, and certainly take that into consideration as we proceed through our process. We've, as John mentioned, we've structured our presentation certainly to answer the 7 questions that we've been given. And we're going to do that. We'll go through the 7. We have a show here for you, but please, it is interactive as it needs to be. We want it to be that. We want to be conversation. We want it to be dialogue. So don't be shy. None of us are. And we welcome that opportunity as well. We looked at the team. You've seen this in our submittal. Certainly my box at the top. I've been in Jacksonville for 37 years. I've been practicing professional I'll say in my 4th decade. Landscape architect, urban designer by trade. I love Jacksonville. I've committed to Jacksonville for a while. From large companies to my own business and currently to Haskell, I've led design teams of all sizes, of all sorts, on projects of all types. And I look forward to this opportunity as well because, again, to have the opportunity to really be on the cusp of something transformational is extremely exciting for any professional, and I look forward to that. We've had the opportunity, again, to hear from the community through the years. Two great planning initiatives. One was by the city of Jacksonville a number of years ago. Their planning district oversight and overview to re-review their planning district master plans. Had the opportunity to facilitate the public input and community outreach aspect of that project, which at one point we did 13 charrettes in 3 months. Monumental effort, but it was very inspirational to hear some of the feedback from the community. And again, the JTA Complete Street Initiative is another. We've had the opportunity, I've worked with various teammates on that project, and the one in which we know the community, we embed within the community, we see the initiatives from JTA, and we welcome that level of thinking. And that's part of this as well. We want to be able to build on. We want to be able to build on those initiatives, build on those relationships we've built. That's all part of it. Again, you'll hear from our team, but we've constructed the team envisioning certainly community engagement in transportation innovation. We have all sorts of support staff, and we look forward to committing this staff to this project and to be at your beckoning call. And we certainly intend to do that on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, hourly if necessary. As part of that too, I want to make sure that we have someone to vet ideas and to vet issues with, and certainly a committee, a review, an oversight committee formulated by you all would be imperative to have as we proceed through this process as well. And we recommend that. If we can assist with that, ensure that the proper stakeholders are involved, and that gives us an opportunity to have, again, that early oversight from you all before maybe we bring something public or we bring something to the community. So that's very important as well. So we have the experience. We are an experienced team. We want to be able to facilitate your vision in the way that you see best fit and most fit. And we look forward to that opportunity as well. We want to be proactive. Yeah, reactionary is good. We have to be agile, as we talked about, but we want to be proactive. So understanding those issues early will really benefit the outcome of this process. And when we talk partnership, you know, there's 3 levels of partnership. One is with the team we brought to the table. 2, it's with the community. We want to make sure that the community is holding hands with us as well. And number 3, and most importantly, is with you. We want to make sure that those 3 levels of our partnership is understood and maximized to its fullest extent. You know, this FTA is an amazing thing. I want to commend you all for really having the ability to get this grant. This is fantastic, and in Cleveland to have an executive sponsor is fabulous. And you know, again, my compliments to all of you because this is truly a transformational opportunity. We want to be able to facilitate that. So first of all, we want to spend some time on talking about the management of that FTA grant. It's extremely important to understand its parameters and timelines, and we're constructed to do that. I'm not going to sit up here and give you schedules and times and everything. We're going to figure that out. We're going to understand it. This is a pilot project. Got to be agile. Got to be flexible. Have to understand where we have to push and pull, as we mentioned earlier. Something very very exciting for us, but we don't want to give you anything set to where we march through this in a very sort of unhumane or inhuman way. This is going to be fully cooperative. The partnership has to be excessive in its conditions met and in its ability to meet the parameters set forth by this FTA grant. So wonderful to have that opportunity. So let's talk a little bit about that, and let's spend some time on really administering and managing that vision through this grant. We talked about in task one, we talked about availability, frequency, approach. One of the things we wanted to mention, Haskell, our company, is a 5-minute transit ride to wherever you are now and where you're going to be. Or it could be a 15-minute walk. And hopefully one day we can jump on an AV and buzz over as well. So we want to just give you that little graphic to say that we're here, we're not going anywhere. We love the fact that we've embedded in the community throughout the years. For a number of years, Haskell has a great reputation as a design and build firm. We're here amplifying its planning capabilities as well. And we love the fact that we're part of the stakeholder component of this community as well as you, and we love that relationship. Community engagement is a huge part, is a huge piece of how we're doing. If Cantrice would like to say a little bit about that, that would be fantastic.
Again, my name is Cantrice Jones with Acuity Design Group. I pretty much know everybody in the room, so it's so good to see all of you, and thank you again. As you know, community engagement is a focal point of what we have to do and what we have to accomplish in this situation. So we've developed a 9 to 10 step process in which we use on a regular basis in order for us to get through this process. The first one is to create a clear, very clear plan of our community outreach and our stakeholder efforts. That's very imperative for us to have a clear understanding of what you want and what our capabilities are and how they mesh together. The second one is data. So we work a little bit internally now with your business intelligence team. So we do have some data that we've used in the past, and we'll continue to use data as a source to help us move forward with what we need to do and find the right way to speak to people and talk to people. And that takes us to the next step, and that's marketing communications. There are multiple ways to communicate with people online, social media, face-to-face, person-to-person. That's very important. And we've also developed and created some technical tools that we used. One of the programs we use is called Mind Mixer, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as we move forward. Visualization. People love to see visuals. People love pictures. People love to touch and feel things. People love to feel a part of. So we want to make sure that we have a creative way to visualize this from people the age of 8 all the way to 80, because this is basically who we're talking to. We're talking to everyone in the community. Fun, making it fun. You don't want it to be boring. This is exciting. This is futuristic. This is something that, you know, teenagers will enjoy. Just yesterday we had a group of teenagers from Jackson High School come out to the U2C test track to take a look at the vehicle and ride the vehicle. They were super excited. We went back to the school afterwards, and of course they had pizza and soda, which I didn't agree with, but that's what they wanted, so that's what we had. And the dialogue was amazing. I mean, they were so engaged. They were so excited about it. They gave us some ideas of what they wanted to see change and what they wanted to see happen. So that's a pretty exciting way to do things. And that turns us into influence. They are influencers. Even as high school students, they influence their parents. They influence their grandparents. They influence the kids that are younger than them. So it's important for them to be a part of that. And with that, influence yields partners. So we have community partners. We have government partners that we have to work with. We have all different types of partners that we need to work with to make sure that we are reaching out to the community in an appropriate way. And then we have to make it relatable. We have to make it personal. So with those partners, what do those partners bring to the table as far as how they can help us pull this all together? I had a conversation with a few people, and the level of importance with this is not losing sight of how important this is. You know, you come up with these great projects and things are super exciting, and then nobody talks about it and it kind of goes away and you kind of forget about it. So this is an opportunity for us to re-embrace the effort of U2C and get it back exciting, everybody get back excited about it so we can move forward, right? Can you please click the button for me, please?
Certainly.
So you guys know that community engagement is my child. Outside of my biological children, community engagement is my child. I love working with the community. I love working with people. I love talking to people, and I love including everyone. And I think that this is one of those projects that has to include everyone. You have technical components that you want to use. You have technical materials that you want to use, but you can't forget the everyday lay person. Everyone doesn't have a cell phone. Everyone doesn't have access to the internet. So it's important that we're mindful of how we reach all of those people. This is a pretty amazing graphic. I love this graphic. It was created a while ago in purpose to use for U2C. And so of course it was fitting for us to use this again. As a community outreach person and a team, we've worked cohesively throughout a variety of these projects. We worked with the Brooklyn Neighborhood Road Diet Study. Of course, you know, we worked with the La Villa Development Project. We'll talk a little bit about that project a little bit later. We've also worked on a few projects in San Marco, and some of the future projects that my firm is currently working on along with some of these team members will also be the Cordish companies we're working with them on Lot J, and we're also working with Peter Rummel and Michael Munz on the district project. So we have a cohesive look at everything from Riverside to the TIAA Bankfield, and making this a cohesive process in which all these people are included. So one of the key things that are super exciting is the fact that for the potential for U2C to go to UF Health. So that's a different community, that's a different group of people that have a different need. Medical tourism is a huge thing that's happening right now. We need to make sure that's a part of what we're doing and reaching out to those folks as well. So I talked to you a little bit about the software that we use, because I know that you guys are very interested in using a platform that's convenient for folks. And so we use a software called Mind Mixer. It's an online portal that you can easily log into and be a part of and create a project, which the U2C Corridor project would be one of the projects that we would start. So the biggest part is the idea submission. So anyone in the community can come in and place their ideas, give their thoughts, what they think, how they see things, what they feel, what they want to see. There's also a map base, so they can see the map and they can drop a pin on a location and give notes. They want to see a grocery store, they want to see a mall, whatever it is that they want to see in that area. They feel like sidewalks need to be improved. Whatever that is, they can drop a pin on the map and they can see that. We can also create a level of surveys. We know the importance, again, of data. I mentioned the importance of data before, so I think it's imperative that we create a survey that's a comprehensive, thorough survey that's not too many questions, that's not too invasive, but that can get us the quality information that we're looking for. Surveys can be changed, they can be added, they can be extended. We can do it for a period of time, whatever it needs to be done to get the answers that we're looking for and the amount of time that we're looking for. Just last week, we're currently working with the North Florida TPO on their long-range transportation plan. We're doing the communications and outreach for that project. We had an event at WJCT, and WJCT usually has these ongoing events that talks about topics in the community. And one of the events we had was based on LRTP. We talked a lot about autonomy, autonomous vehicles. We had about 75 people show up. It was a pretty amazing opportunity to see all these people come into the room to hear what we had to say. Because typically, you know, having a regular community meeting, sometimes you have 2 people, depending on the topic, sometimes you have 200 people. So we try our best to find opportunities where people are already going to congregate. That makes things a little bit easier for us. But I brought that up to mention instant polling. So say, for example, we have an opportunity to have 75 people in the room, and we have an opportunity that everybody has a cell phone. There's a way that we can instant poll them to automatically get data from them from that moment of how they're feeling based on the presentation that they've seen from us, right? Photo sharing is pretty cool. Again, that's something people can pull, drop a photo in an area in which they want to see maybe some more landscaping done or beautification done in an area, so that's super important. And the challenge. So I talked to David just yesterday. He was at the U2C track, and he mentioned to me that JTA has a plan to separate U2C and create its own, and I'm not sure if it's a Facebook page and social media, but he also mentioned that there's going to be a unique hashtag for U2C. So of course, we can take that and utilize that information and put it in a challenge. Millennials, teenagers, they love hashtag whatever. You know, they love challenges, whether they're fun or goofy, but this could be technical and informative for them as well. So here is a real life example of Mind Mixer. This is a project in Missoula, downtown. This is a part of their master plan. So as you can see, this is a part of the survey, some of the concepts that were shared. Here are some of the results that you see based on, during a charrette, what people thought, how they felt. So again, data is everything. We know that, right? We know data gives us so much help with understanding how we move forward. Having the right information helps us figure out how we need to move forward.
Therese, I have a brag point on this one, because if you know about Mind Mixer, they're a big national presence in this online engagement thing, but we were their first customer outside Omaha when they first started. We used them for the plan for El Paso, and we've had a strategic partnership with them for a long time. That Missoula job is one of ours, and we learned something really powerful that relates to what Therese was saying, which is don't just do one survey at the beginning when you haven't gotten really started, but really bring questions out as we go. In fact, the new question you ask on Tuesday might be a reflection of something we learned the previous Thursday from a meeting or from an activity. So it's more interactive, and that means you're reaching people often. So this question about a shared street concept on Front Street, we didn't know we were going to ask that ahead of time. It wasn't all pre-cooked. It was something that we heard on that same week, and we said, okay, well, let's ask people what they think. And that means the social media contacts and the email database got something new, some new way to participate, which is kind of leading the building up of trust you want from design in public.
Exactly. And a key word is trust, right? That's very imperative for us to make sure that people have a clear understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. Based on so many public meetings that we've done in the past, people have been told certain things and promised certain things, and they lose that level of trust. So we want to make sure that people have a clear understanding of the trust. The next slide, please. Would you like to go into details about this?
This is
the map that I was talking about.
Therese showed. So there was somebody suggested, let's narrow up some of the crosswalks and bring curb extensions to miniaturize the intersection. So we asked people, where do you think that belongs? And so instead of just asking people, what's your big idea, we can say, where does that need to be, or where's your first priority place to put it? And these days your answers can be geolocated, so we can also see whether the answers are coming from the neighborhood or coming from carpetbaggers from Coral Gables or somewhere.
Exactly. So again, this is one of the tools that we're going to be planning on using. But I'm going to say this. I am going to say that no matter what technology you use, no matter what device you may have, you have to have an understanding that there are people who do not have access to this information. And we have to be inclusive. We can't just select the people that we see that have a phone or have access to internet. Everyone has to be included. So our team has no issue with knocking on doors and creating a level of a grassroots campaign so that we can reach all people.
Good morning. One of the things we wanted to do in this engagement piece is actually break out the stakeholder engagement role, people who will have a substantial role in carrying out this, and how do we get all of them to rally around this grant in a new kind of way. And we're really going to do that in 3 different ways. And the first is just a shared understanding of the successful elements of any TOD, whether there's a driver in the transit vehicle or not. That we want everyone to understand as a baseline. The second is understanding disruptive trends. Whether it is autonomous vehicles, there's all kinds of disruption happening right now. So some of these stakeholders will be coming in around resilience, economic transformation. We can't forget these things because they will affect the land use, the transportation, the consumer acceptance of technology. So again, how can we get everybody to rally around the future and where things are going? And then finally, building that stakeholder rapport so that as we build these different policies and plans, when there are trade-offs, everybody has empathy for each other's role, and we can begin to march into that with a shared understanding of where we want to go with this. Next. I apologize for this slide, it's very busy, but it's one of the most important in the presentation. I've been working on helping communities plan for autonomous shuttles for 2.5 years now at the national level, and this has been a labor of love and a lot of mistakes. But really what happens is we make the mistake of jumping to the future of built-out TOD and autonomous everything, but we really don't understand what do we wake up and start doing tomorrow. A lot of my clients make the mistake of saying, I want this plan in 5 years, and 10 years, and 15 years. Technology doesn't work like that. Technology works more by market adoption and penetration. So what I try and do is help clients understand what's available now, so you're not missing out, what's trending. So technology on the market right now, it's available, but it's only starting to get adopted. And Jacksonville is known nationwide as one of the first and most progressive smart cities. So a lot of this you already have, and this is just an example. For emerging technology, what's in the pilot phase, and what can we sort of jump out in front and watch what other people are doing and learn from them? And in the future, I like to ask questions. We don't know what's going to happen, but asking the right questions is important. Then there's the technology part. And again, sometimes we make the mistake of just looking at one technology at a time. But again, we've got that fire hose of different technologies: smart city, parking, cybersecurity. Again, our theme this month is safety. Safety first relies on that kind of technology being there for us in the different phases. And all of these different technologies send signals to each other. So, if parking technology is advancing pretty fast, that's going to influence parking demand and how we design our garages and our phasing. And then finally, what are the planning needs with all of these? And the idea here is to help you get out in front, to help forecast what's going to happen so that we're already ahead of it before it gets there and we've already planned for it. And again, one of the strengths of this team is phasing. This doesn't happen overnight, and really getting that phasing is critical. Next. Real life example, we're doing this now in Lake Worth Beach, which is a low-income neighborhood near West Palm Beach. They wanted to envision the mobility plan of the future for their own community. So we threw out the rule books on how to do a transportation plan and got a different group of stakeholders in the room, including law enforcement, because we thought, well, maybe technology can help with their vehicles or something like that. But at the end of the day, they told us that alleys are a main source of criminal activity, and if we could build the mobility network on reinvigorating alleys, that would prevent crime. And we all came away astounded, because we would have never thought of this had we not done this activity. So it really does work with some of this anticipatory and scenario planning. Thanks.
Task 3, existing conditions. Certainly there's been a lot of work done by you all already. And part of our understanding and grasping of the framework, we have to make sure that we understand everything that's been gathered and also identify what we need, zoning information, certainly all the listing that's there in the FDA, we know we have to address. So we wanted to at least acknowledge the fact that you have to start with the baseline of material, with the framework, to continue to strengthen our understanding of the issues and processes as well. So we wanted to at least tip our hat to the fact that, yes, as a design team, we will do whatever we need to do to ensure that we have every bit of baseline material that we need to further our understanding and knowledge as well. We all know that the downtown overlay districts have been recently simplified, and we want to adhere to the parameters and development guidelines within those overlay districts. We need to certainly have that understanding moving forward as well. Part of the existing conditions. So, Javier?
Let me tell you something that I was thinking. It's really commendable what you guys are doing. And I will tell you a little bit how do I feel that I'm in a position to tell you that. 25 pounds ago, I used to be a good cycling guy, and I used to race competitively. And if you understand the concept of drafting, I used to position myself with the right group so that I will save my energy for the last minute of the race and be able to run. Well, I feel like you guys are really leading this race. And it's a double hitter because you're not only taking this with new emerging technologies, but now you're really adventuring in the development process as a transit agency, mid-sized transit agency. The reason, because I can tell you that, is a year and a half ago, I was the director of long-range planning for Capital Metropolitan Transportation Agency. And I had under my department transit-oriented development. And I know, I've been sitting on that side, giving procurement process, hiring the right company. It is a risky business, and you are doing it so well, and you are leading the edge. And I can tell you that because we were looking at what you were doing. I was advising my board, we need to pay attention to what Jacksonville is doing, because they're moving in the right direction. So really, it's very commendable. I want to show you some of the examples and the experience that I was able to gain while I was functioning as director of long-range planning. As you know, Austin is a destination place, booming, a lot of activity, a lot of things, but a lot of headaches. And you have to be ready to face those headaches. And any little mistake that an agency does will put you down, big time. So, next slide. We learned from our mistakes, and I'm going to have the opportunity in another interaction to tell you about that. But one of the things that I recommended to our board is that if we are serious about transit-oriented development, we have to be transparent. We cannot allow any information, any misunderstanding to happen, because the opposition will kill you immediately. We'll begin criticizing, we'll begin spreading rumors, we'll begin to talk about the things that you're not doing right. It's very easy to get in that position. So one of the tasks that we wanted to have is along the corridors the Capital Metro has been able to implement high-capacity transit. Let's work with our partners, county, city, the different governments, to create a platform where everybody can see what we are doing. We don't have to hide anything. So we developed a tool that we call it the Transit-Oriented Development Priority Tool. It is in the internet. You can see it on the website of Capital Metro, and it's open for anybody. And you just need to go and click and play. This is the first slide. You click on one of the station's locations. It gives you a bigger map of the station. You click again on one of those, and you got all the data. Everything that is happening around the station. It tells you the readiness. It tells you what's missing. Highlights the opportunities, highlights the problems. Some of these stations don't have sidewalks. How do you want to increase ridership? How do you want to go with a major, transit-oriented development if basic infrastructure is missing on the station? So we develop a set of a scorecard to tell everybody, this is not a tool that is just for, people like us. It is a tool that was designed also for the newcomer that is coming from California, that is trying to find an apartment that is affordable, that is connected to transit, so that he can go to the university, period. So we had the scorecard, and again, it's a pretty easy interactive tool that gives you all the information. This slide, it tells you about population density, land use, parcels, employment density, what infrastructure exists in regards to transit, how can you make your connections. It gives you a lot of other information. Next one, and it shows you a picture of what's going on over there. So going back to the picture, I really commend you because, I tell you, at the beginning when emerging technologies came, in Capital Metro, unfortunately, they were like little kids chasing bubbles. Bubble, here it is. We got excited, and then that bubble burst. Oh, there is another one. Let's go over there. You guys are setting the path by developing these programs that are going to give the rest of the country the path to follow successfully when we are really trying to get serious about transit-oriented development.
We talked earlier about some of the initiatives, the early initiatives. I've had the opportunity to work with you all a number of years ago. We looked at TOD locations all over, actually the city and the south side. I wanted to just illustrate the fact that this isn't new thinking. You guys have been at the tip of the spear for some time, and we had the opportunity to do some things even before 220 got to be what it is today. I threw a little sketch out there at the bottom right about the Skyway, because there's a Skyway right away that goes right down the front of the building. And I approached the architect and said, hey, what if you integrate the Skyway with your architecture and maybe look at a TOD opportunity? And I think he threw me out of the room. But at least the idea, we were thinking about how that interface could happen. We looked at the O&M station. We looked at various alternatives and thoughts. But I wanted to just illustrate that because you all have been thinking of the traditional TOD. And that's it's moving. It's growing. It's expanding. It's maturing as well, and we have to keep up with that maturity rate. The American Planning Association, a few years ago, I believe it was 2015, had a design charrette. They had their conference in Jacksonville, and I was asked to facilitate that charrette. And we had 200 planners in the room that we were able to extract some information and ideas from. And the area identified by JTA was La Villa. And knowing that the JRTC was on the cusp of happening, how would that act as that catalyst or that stimulus? So we actually did a little plan of La Villa, and this is a result of the ideas that we received in that 4-hour planning session during the conference, when I had a room full of fresh eyes. And it was a lot of fun to see some of the thoughts and certainly some of the creativity involved there. And I love to see that. I love to see the complete street, the level of detail there, plus the fact of, okay, how can we begin to illustrate more commercial, more mixed use, more scaled development, if you will, for La Villa. So anyway, just a thought. I wanted to highlight those sketches and plans, very preliminary, but things that we have been talking about, and you all have been in partnership and have been on the leading edge of that conversation.
One of the wonderful things about doing this kind of work is what you're really doing is helping people visualize change before it occurs, so they can make decisions about how to take growth and change on their own community's terms. And that means bringing people's awareness up about how everything is connected to everything else, and how what you do on a given infill development parcel actually has regional implications. And I thought I'd show you an example of that kind of thinking. We led the multi-year effort, large team, to produce the new specific plan for downtown Oakland, California, of aerial of existing conditions here. And Oakland is actually the convergence of all the great regional transit menu that the Bay Area and Alameda County in particular is lucky to have. This is actually, these locations in the downtown have the most transit choices of any other place. So first we help them visualize what's already in the pipeline, since growth and change have come back to Oakland after a 50-year delay. These are the kinds of things that are already happening. And then we said, all right, there's a trend here, and there's also a regional responsibility to urge that growth and change to occur where that transit is. And that feels a little similar to our mission here. What we do on one parcel, regional implications. This is the immediate prospects over the next several years under the downtown specific plan. What you're looking at is channeling the growth to the spot where the BART stations are and the Alameda County transit spots are. But we use these as tools to help people get the conversation started, and then they started teaching us things. And one of the things they taught us was about the great opportunity here, next slide, that lies between downtown and West Oakland. That's Interstate 980, a tragedy in American transportation planning history, not justified as a road for traffic, really created, honestly, as a trench to separate downtown Oakland from West Oakland. It's unfortunate and not necessary, not needed as a road. So the citizens came to us and said, let's decommission that. Let's plan the new plan for downtown Oakland so that it shows the idea of recapturing that space, using the trench to run the new BART line between the Trans Bay Tunnel and on, and then above the ground to create a boulevard that's a great address instead of a gap in the city, and then use the space that's recaptured for mixed income housing. So this wasn't our idea. We didn't know about this when we first showed up. We learned it from the community, and then we were able to stitch it into the plan. I think that visualizing change is a pretty exciting thing. Now, what we also learned in Oakland was what was most important to them. And as crucial as the technicalities of land use and transportation are, what's really important to them was equity and diversity and keeping Oakland creative, especially downtown Oakland, which has become a creative hub. And so the plan translates the stuff that we're used to seeing in plans, like land use and urban form and what connects to what goes where, to things that they really wanted to know about, which is how does that relate to our community, our experience on the ground, our places, a habitat for people. And so kind of unusual in city planning to see culture, equity, and creativity pushed to the front of the plan. That's the priority. And the economic development tools, the transportation tools are to leverage the community that people said they want. So we're pretty excited about that example. I hope we can use what we learned on that experience to help with this one.
And then threading this to the task at hand, we don't have to recreate goals and outcomes. You've done that already. We'll use this process to reaffirm these goals and see where we maybe need to, because of the new technology, expand it a little bit. But the other thing we're going to do, very important from here, is this is where we set our metrics. And so based on the metrics, of course, then you thread the needle to, well, what kind of data do we need to collect? And then how are we going to collect that data that makes it easy for JTA to constantly monitor in a very safe way whether or not you're meeting your goals of success. And so from there.
And certainly as the manager of this team, I have to make sure that our success is continually measured. The components of that process, certainly we have to do the right things under the right rules, if you will. We have to know the financial incentives and have to understand that we have to make it attractive. It has to be attractive. It has to be a win-win on both levels. Shared benefits, we talked about community, we talked about stakeholders, we talked about all of this. We have to share in the optimization of this process, certainly. And we have to ensure, too, that the infrastructure is in place. The right infrastructure at the right time in the right places will help facilitate our vision moving forward.
Have you figured out that when we looked at your questions, we realized there was a lot to question one? But we really did. We're getting to the end of question one. One of the clear things to us from the large and complex study area is that every site is not like every other site. Every acre is not like every other acre. There's a huge variety in the places that are covered by the U2C planning program. So that means that one size doesn't fit all, and some places are more transit and transit-oriented development ready than others, and that means we have to actually think about where the places are that are just getting started, where the ones are that are mature already, and the low-hanging fruit where TOD readiness has already arrived. So thinking about it really belongs to the map. I thought it'd be useful to see an example of that in a similar project for TOD funded by FTA. This is our project for Lansing, Michigan. The Capital Area Transit Authority is our client. And they went to the municipalities along the future BRT line and said, someday we're going to increase the already prevalent transit in this corridor along Michigan and Grand River Avenue. What we want to do is make sure we're transit ready with the kind of development that comes to it. So they gathered Lansing Township, East Lansing, Meridian, Okemos together in one room, and with the FTA's support, created transit-oriented development design standards and helped them update and mature their plans. That started with some data, and the data showed us that these places were not all similar. They were different in terms of TOD readiness. They were different in terms of who was there and what they were doing, and where the concentrations of office versus residential for where higher incomes and lower incomes were located. It sort of embodies that idea that one size doesn't fit all. Okay, the next one. So one of the things that became apparent in this project, and I think Greater Lansing has been learning from it, is that as rents rise faster than incomes and affordability becomes an issue in the popular areas, like downtown East Lansing, the best thing you can do is think of housing and transportation costs as a composite number and work hard to increase the menu of low-cost transportation options to help offset the rising cost of people's rent. And that's a kind of example of the work that came out of this, and the municipalities were able to embody that in their rules. Next. So we simplified the rule book. So here's a long piece of that corridor. The project is called Shaping the Avenue. And that one size does not fit all approach is similar to your overlay districts, right? In which the properties in one place are respond with one set of rules, properties in another. And then we translated that in terms the community would recognize, because the DNA for their future form-based code was in the traditional historical cities. The places that they liked the best, we said, okay, that's the genetic code. The building to street relationships are proven to work, and places recyclable and adjustable, adaptable over time. So these are sample pages from the rule book that reflect those traditions, which was the idea of the TOD. So then, we illustrated that for people so they could begin to realize how using a better kind of rule book, and by thinking of land use and transportation at once, they could take underutilized sites and start to build the town to make the place more complete rather than just a bigger population or more development.
Okay, so back in 2016, this takes you back a little bit to when our team worked on the design competition for the Jacksonville Regional Transportation Center, right? So even back in 2016, we thought of higher density levels for us to have more success in regards to supporting and increasing ridership for the JTA. So you can see this as this vision that our team kind of already had, right? So we understand where we are now. We understand the projects that have already started, and we might not necessarily be completely agreeable with where we are today, but now we have an opportunity to move forward from this point, moving forward with the property and the land that we do have in the surrounding areas to move forward with potentially utilizing higher density levels. You can go to the next slide. So just a few months ago, we wrapped up the La Villa development strategy. That was a project that Rommel Mons and myself worked together towards with the Jacksonville Transportation Authority and under the direction at the time of Andre Wallace with the Downtown Investment Authority. So that was a very comprehensive plan that we put together that looked at La Villa as a whole. And we understand the importance of having density. We understand and we understood the importance of bringing in cultural and heritage components to it. And we also understood and understand the importance of traffic and transportation. So we just use this as a semblance to understand that this tool is now being used as a guide for any development that now comes into the Villa area. And we just want to make sure you understand that we're still in a really good place. Regardless of what has happened and where we are, we're still in a really good place to move forward.
Thank you. I'm going to take Teresa's really nice summary of answering question 2 at the local level, and let's kind of scale up a little bit to answer that question about what's happening with transit-oriented development and density and this new variety of ways of getting around. I was lucky enough to cut my teeth on transit-oriented development in Arlington, Virginia. And they had that early model of bullseye zoning where you put as much density as you possibly can on top of the metro stations. And this was back in the 1960s. And the most people are willing to walk or travel is 1/4 of a mile. So what we're finding, though, over the past 5-10 years with all these new transportation options and active transportation, is that starting to kind of melt away into a new system where the transit shed is getting a little bit bigger. People are willing to walk and bike farther, but also they're starting to link up these little networks of getting from place to place. There is really a new model evolving, and I think this UTC urban autonomous circulator is actually going to take it to the next level. So let's look at how. So again, this is the old model of the distances between stations and what was acceptable. And then, of course, now we've got all these new mobility modes that are starting to deliver the data on a really average trip length. And some interesting things are happening. So with the scooters, love them or hate them, they are filling a mobility gap of that 1 to 1.2 mile, too far to walk. Things that people are resorting to their car to travel a very short distance. The same with bikes and bike share. Moped share is now a thing in 3 cities around the country. Again, love it or hate it. But people want to get around in ways that don't involve a big machine anymore. And again, you can see this. Next. So this is what's happening with that 1 mile with the scooters and maybe with the bikes. And then what happens when you get a little bit of a farther distance, let's say with circulators. And then finally, your mobility shed is now so much bigger. So that imperative to put so much density on top of a station is really sort of not as compelling as it used to be. So you begin to have these placemaking and linking opportunities all around the neighborhoods with varying heights and densities, which again brings that sense of place, that sense of community, where you can have the parks and the historic preservation without impinging on the performance of your system. So there's some exciting things going on, and you guys are really inventing what it looks like to have this right here, and that's how we're going to pay attention to these mobility sheds and density.
I just wanted to go back one slide, please. I just wanted for you guys to take a look at this and have a clear understanding of what this actually means based on where we are. So not only are we centrally located and having the U2C affect that corridor, but we also fall into North Riverside. We also go into East Jacksonville. We go into Mixontown, and there's even some Murray Hill opportunity. So think about the level of density that are in those areas, and the amount of people, and the potential for increasing ridership based upon that. I just wanted to throw that in there.
We've been calling this mobility-oriented development as just to distinguish it from our dad's or our uncle's TOD, because it involves filling in those gaps,
right.
just like the ones you just described, and getting this wider shed of opportunity. But you know what that really is? That's just a town. That because all development was transit-oriented development in the past before we got in the habit of doing parking-oriented development. And we called them towns. We called them neighborhoods because it wasn't nodal in the same way that we're now expecting or have come to expect around heavy rail infrastructure. Now, the cool thing about that is that wider shed of riders and neighborliness is served with a much lighter kind of infrastructure. We don't need to build as big and heavy a thing with as high a cost per mile to do it. So there's the two things here. The disruptive trend, which sounds kind of just like a scary idea, right? is actually disrupting something really worth disrupting. So big benefits to MOD.
Right. And so let's talk about MOD. So you can start to build these constellations of these hubs where you aggregate these different options. So the idea of grab and go mobility is no longer a set of keys, it's a star card. And maybe you can use that in the future to rent a bike or a scooter or hail a cab or something like that within this whole system. And again, you start to build these little hubs around the neighborhoods that can also become hubs of economic activity as well, to the benefit of all. So again, I'm the winner when it comes to really complicated slides. I apologize for that. But this is from Sandag in San Diego, and they've done a lot of good work on mobility hubs already. I don't believe in recreating the wheel. I believe what we bring is these best examples from other places, and how can we customize those for Jacksonville. And of course, you've got the planning for autonomous in addition to the basic elements of what we're trying to do. And again, the operating system is that walkable community that will operate no matter what the technology turns out to be. If you read the headlines, scooters are sort of a mixed bag of success, not a success right now, and whether or not that shared model can survive. But on the other hand, the rate of people buying their own scooters is off the charts, and e-bikes. So it may not be good for Lime and Bird, but it could be really good for JTA in your system. And who knows, maybe one day JTA operates its own fleet share to complement these other sorts of systems along with the autonomous shuttle. And so a lot of what we want to do is help lay that groundwork for any future that may come, so that you can quickly step into these opportunities to expand how JTA works as a system of a mobility provider. And really, that's what we want to help you understand and get to. So I'm going to go right into Q3. Are there any questions? Okay. So I love parking. And talking about parking and right-sizing parking, which is really the trend that we're going to right now. You read a lot in the paper about, well, let's get rid of minimums, or no, we need extra parking. And really what the planning imperative is to figure out how you're going to actually adjust supply and demand. Again, no matter what the future brings, how do you have an adaptable parking program? And so what we will help do is look at trends in demand and then balance and phasing. Just a note, it's pretty clear by now, we do actually oversupply parking in our zoning codes. And in fact, there was a study in 2017, we are particularly adept at oversupplying parking at transit-oriented developments. And so that's just out there. I also want to point out that there are quite a few households in Jacksonville that are 0 or 1 car households. And that really, that trend is starting to pick up. Baby boomers want to downsize to either 1 car or 0 cars. There are households who can't afford a car. And really, transit-oriented development is all of our chance to supply housing for people in that situation, whether by choice or out of desire. And so really what we started doing is looking in the Jacksonville area, is there a market? And the answer is yes. We're also looking at some of these technologies and how it affects how we design and provide parking. And one of the things that's available in 2020 cars right now is this idea of self-park, where you drive your car up in the drive aisle, you get out, and the car backs itself up. Well, why does that matter? It matters because all of a sudden the dimensions of the spaces shrink because you don't need that room to open the doors. You can start to fit more cars in smaller spaces. And again, the theme of what this team brings is that adaptation. So we're always a couple of steps ahead thinking about why and how does this matter. And even if somebody comes up in their 2002 Dodge Dart that really doesn't have any kind of technology, there are new kind of valets that can actually fit that bill. And so again, at WGI, we have people who are starting to figure out sort of the mathematics of how you phase all of this in. Now, parking. We really wanted to drive home the parking situation downtown and how we can adjust over time. We just took a look at the built landscape and where the parking is. And I think that at bottom, the answer is there's already lots of parking. And so this is opportunity, though. That's how we see this. And it's the opportunity for phasing, for contingency, and all these aspects of right-sizing parking going forward.
It's really not just a transportation function, all this parking. It's also a big effect on your brand as a community for visitors. I shot this picture out of my hotel room window. So you just go to the next one. This has a lot to do with the impression that you leave on visitors. So you probably know this, but we work about half the time for local governments and community groups and about half the time for private developers. So we are used to thinking like private developers think. By the way, not in the same place at the same time. No private developer clients here. But so one of them owns 40 hotels all across the country. And I asked him recently what's going on. The old number we all grew up trained to use was 0.7 or 0.75 parking spaces per hotel room key. It's in the zoning. It's in the expectations of hotel flags. If you have meeting rooms or ballrooms, it might be 1 or 1.1 parking spaces per key. You want to know what the new number is? The actual demand? 0.35 and dropping like a rock, still dropping. And all of that drop occurred in the last 4 years as a result of Uber and Lyft, because people used to fly into an airport and rent a rental car and drive to the hotel and pay Omni $29 a night to store it for them and then reverse the process on the way out, and they just don't do it anymore. So that one single small sudden disruptive trend just cut the parking demand enormously. Of course, similar things are going on with office and residential development. And so I think the answer in what Lisa just said was flexibility for what may come, because urban demand for parking spaces is dropping fast.
So what are the elements of a right-size parking plan? One of the things that we are beginning to understand is this idea of district parking. For so many years, we were just trained to think of parking as something that's in a zoning code all by itself. Fast forward, and new technology allows us to orchestrate parking better. And a good example is Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where they are building an app that just aggregates all the public and all the private parking in one place, so that if you're a parker, you can see where are the open spaces, which ones are free, which ones are capped at 1 hour, and you really let that traveler decide. And speaking of travelers and TOD, a lot of times we just think of parking, which is a very vehicle-centric way of looking at things. But for Jacksonville, I think what I'd like to do is let's look at the traveler and how we're going to phase in TOD. So in the near term, what's going to happen is as you build these places as destinations, you will have a lot of travelers who are coming by car. You know, they'll want to come downtown, words, for the experience and for just an enjoyable place to be. But over time, really what you want to build at the end of it is your built-in ridership. A place where you've got people who don't travel by car because it's the least convenient and acceptable thing you want to happen. And so in the beginning, you'll have a lot of people where parking is something you want to think heavily about. But towards the end, getting to that built-in ridership, people who live there, work there, are used to just hopping on transit to get around for everyday needs. That's really what we're building to. So again, what is that traveler-centric phasing that we'll be able to do with parking? And again, getting down to a real-life example, this is something I worked on in Seminole County, and I'm going to skip to the punchline. It's a mixed-use development in a suburban area where we were able to eliminate 9,000 parking spaces from a mixed-use development out of 18,000. And the way we did it is at the very kickoff, we used that anticipatory planning with the client and with Seminole County to say, okay, what is really starting to come online? Seminole County is really, really interested in using technology for transit and for development. And so once we understood what the technology phases were, we aligned it with the development phases. So in phase 1, we didn't cut out a lot of parking. That just didn't make sense. But in phase 2, that's really where we were able to cut out the second car. And the way we did that is there's new companies that are offering car share, but to individual projects. So think about Zipcar that's available on the street for anybody with a subscription to rent by the hour, but it's actually part of your rent or part of the condo or part of your benefit as an employer, that you always have a car waiting for you. And so from the initial studies, we got rid of the second car and drove that parking down into usable space. So I just wanted to leave it, this isn't something we're making up where what technology could do. It's really being accepted into site plans now in a really exciting way. So we want to help y'all do that kind of thing to right size and phase the parking.
One of the things that it is pretty important, and when I was sitting right there evaluating teams, is having the opportunity to connect. And I can tell you this team is not only professionally engaged, but in my interaction with the team members, they really are emotionally connected. And so we want to tell you that we care, we really care, and we want ATA to be successful. And we're bringing experience from, the vast experience that these professionals have, that we have, to show you that we struggle, that we have success that we can tell you, but also we have failure. And it has been costly in the way that bringing these projects back to life. This is the area, and as you can see on the aerial photo, it's a pretty bad area. And if I show you the next slide, go back, I'm sorry. This is I-35, Downtown Convention Center, Austin, the heart of the city is right there. This is a photo, that shows not too long ago, but in the 80s, nobody wanted to be on the other side of I-35. Pretty bad. If you go back to the other slide, please. This is an abandoned railroad yard that even the railroad abandoned. Nobody, and the lots sit there for many years until the community, minority area, Hispanic, Black community, decided we need to recover that because bad things were happening there. So they decided that they wanted to work with the city and recover in these areas. And they wanted to look for an agency that will help them to recover the land and make it part of their community. So the Plaza Saltillo development became a reality, but it took a lot of time. Finally, in the early 80s, Capital Metro made the bold decision to acquire the property, not knowing exactly what was going to happen because there was an opportunity about commuter rail coming from Lander. You can see the tracks. Maybe, maybe not, we don't know. So what I'm saying is it takes a lot of time. And you remember my conversation about being in the head of the peloton? You're doing that, and you have to have resistance. You have to have endurance to make this project successful. Moving forward, after many headaches and many strugglings, and really Capital Metro learning how to get into the development activity of the city, and also thanks to the partnership of the city and really looking at the east side, you know, this is a major success now. It's about to open the first 2 blocks. The question number 4 is about retail. Is retail, we can get positive or negative? Of course, if everything is done and the moment is right and the market allowed, it's amazing. People is fighting for these places. Whole Food House, grocery store, mini Target, where nobody wanted to be. Now is the place to be. Now is a very successful story, but it took a lot of dedication, leadership, and being really serious about what you guys are, public service. That's a serious commitment. It really is a serious commitment. So, next slide. You can see a lot of things. This is coming from the developer, already doing marketing, selling. A lot of things are happening, and you know the numbers keep changing, and because when you are successful, you also start getting into other kind of problems, affordability. The market is right there. And a lot of the members of this community are struggling because they cannot, you know, afford living in where they used to live. So how do we balance that? How do we balance that? So this development had to go through a major effort in the negotiations to bring low-income, affordable housing. So there is a percentage of the units here that are actually set for that. The developer wasn't too excited about it because he couldn't make the numbers work. And are you going to give me the opportunity to go higher or lower? The city code doesn't allow me that. So just imagine the amount of negotiation that went on. The contract was given in 2016. It took a year and a half of negotiations with the developer to make it happen. Once everything was signed, construction went up and it's about to be open. Very, very important. And through the process, next slide, there's, like I was saying, a lot of requirements. Then you have to really be aware, okay, so I'm bringing this density. What's going to happen with traffic impacts? My neighborhood here is going to start complaining. So all of that, get ready, because it's going to happen. But it's part of being in the game, it's part of to be in the race, leading the way. And having said that, you know, this is a very important slide because it allows us to go through the next step, which is, let's talk about traffic. What happened?
I like question 5 a lot, but I have to say when we first saw it, I thought I should respond first by asking, may we have an easier question, please? It's actually a pretty exciting question. I don't think it's that hard. For a long time, every planning process, especially in Florida with our growth management system, started with and ended with the question of level of service and basically measures of traffic congestion change at intersections. And the question that was asked was, how do we maintain the low friction, free-flowing condition for the person who chose to motor alone, no matter what the cost, inland or to society or what have you. So throwing that question at the system resulted in a long period of time in our history, that's downtown West Palm Beach not very long ago, when the assumption was wider and faster roads are better roads. And that, I'm thankful to say, we've now shifted away from, because we realized that was the wrong question. When you saddle the system with the obligation to solve for the low friction, free flowing condition for motoring alone, that means you're taking the least efficient means of moving people around possible in terms of the amount of space it takes, both in the roadway, but also when we don't need to store their vehicles when they're not using them. And so the new question is, how do we get a larger percentage of the trips to take place with shorter trips and with walking, biking, and transit and multi-occupant trips? And the answer to that, of course, is the design of the built environment. In the wider and faster roads or better roads period, we got places like Clematis Street, which you just saw, where everything else that has to happen from storefront to storefront within the right-of-way is given too little space, because we pushed all the pedestrians, all the amenities, all the trees, all the seating off to the side of the road, trying to hold as much of that right-of-way for cars as possible, and not to mention the difficulty of getting a wheelchair through an environment like that. So in West Palm Beach, they asked us to turn that question upside down. How do we make a place where people want to be, where they're comfortable and happy to park a little farther away from their destination if they arrive by car at all? And the result was the redesign of Clematis Street. This is the new Clematis Street. Now it's narrow, and it's curbless, and it's slow, and there's a lot more generous space for people and for trees and dining and so forth. We have the next one. So this is what it looks like now. Second phase is under construction at present. This was a big opportunity for the community just to rethink their relationship to streets. So in the end, of course, downtown West Palm Beach, here you're a block from the Brightline station, is a TOD. And the next one. And so that means the intersections have to get smaller. So there's less distance to cross, and there's less of that feeling of endangerment for people that are moving around on 2 wheels or 2 feet. And one little lesson learned here. I discovered that the cost upgrade on those beautiful little pin bollards between the ones that are static and the ones that are retractable is $300 a bollard. In other words, almost nothing in the scheme of things. So now we have retractable bollards at all the intersections and crosswalks, so we can close a block to traffic altogether on Friday night or on the weekend or on festival days very easily with the turn of a key for that simple upgrade. And so I'm not selling bollards, I don't have any shares in bollard companies, but I just realized how readily available. There's nothing high-tech about that, right? So in the new phases of Clematis Street, all the bollards are retractable. So we can take the whole, all of it out. We can repurpose a parking space as a dining space. We can change the dynamic management of the curb. So a space that was parking yesterday can be ride-hailing, pickup, and drop-off tomorrow, for example. So that leads into a favorite subject of mine and Lisa's. Have you figured out we finished each other's sentences? Been working together a long time, which is curbside management.
So thank you. You've gotten a taste now of how to design the hardscape, but we're here for a plan and policies. And so really what we want to throw out there is that with our team, you will get what we like to call the programmable street. For the past 100 years, we basically installed a street for parking and moving cars. And once you put that concrete in, it didn't change. Signs didn't change, curbs didn't change. Uses maybe every once in a while if you could get it through the system. Again, that's turned on its head now. And so if we look at your TOD system, how do we develop a new way of looking at streets as real estate that you can program physically, digitally, and economically? So let's go through those. With the physically, we kind of covered that, where you can do, whoops, go back, sorry. So with physically, how do you have quick build, modular infrastructure, changeable infrastructure, so that, as Victor was saying, this could be pick up and drop off at one time. It could be a festival street. You could expand dining, bike share, scooter parking, all those sorts of things, things we haven't even thought of yet. So really, how does our TOD of the future look like for that street management? And that's a whole new ballgame, but it's really exciting, and it's something for TOD that's vitally important. As technology begins to evolve, it lets us evolve with it.
We don't have to read too many of your local headlines and read too many of your memos to realize that the on-street parking quantity, supply, and location is a big local sector. So how to evolve the on-street parking supply is clearly, if you want to have that conversation, we have to be able to bring these technologies.
Exactly, and really programming, so maybe it could be an autonomous shuttle route during peak hour, but other times it could be parking. It could be deliveries. We haven't even touched on the impacts of e-commerce and what's happening there that's totally transforming traffic, the economy, retail, and what does that look like with TOD, especially with higher density buildings where you have building managers now that don't know what to do with all the different boxes, much less an era when sidewalk and air drones are going to be delivering everything from a 6-pack to dinner to whatever you just ordered on Amazon. Not in one big package, but at 4 deliveries every day because you forgot that hairbrush. Programming digitally. This is where Jacksonville stands out with a lot of the work that you're doing regionally. And again, what do the communication networks look like? Do we have to have small cells here? And how do we fit those into a place that's meant to be walkable and attractive? Some of these small cell networks are as big as a refrigerator, and a lot of companies want to just put them up on this pole right here. So really, how do we work with those companies to blend it all in together? The other thing too with programming digitally, we're not too far away from a future where perhaps we can cap speeds in a district. We do it with scooters now. You can cap the speed of a scooter at 3 miles an hour if you go outside the zone, 10 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour. Soon we'll be able to do that with cars. And so what does that look like digitally within your network and safety and things of that nature? And who do you have to work with? Who are the new stakeholders? And then finally, and most importantly, for folks in the room who are looking at the future and changes in funding, financing, revenue, this is a big deal. And it's one where we're trying to work hard with our municipalities as we change the revenue of the curb from 2-hour parking to something that's much more dynamic with pickup and drop off and things of that nature. And so within your TOD plan, how can we help you figure out that new adaptation to new sources of revenue? And then finally, Victor started with LOS, and I want to end with LOS because that's just so ingrained with how we figure out how we manage traffic. And I wanted to use the example of the District of Columbia and their TOD traffic impact. One of the things that they looked hard into was managing congestion through LOS, and they realized very quickly that it didn't get to the root cause of where that traffic congestion is coming from around the transit station. What mattered the most was parking and the supply of parking. Now, the reason this is such a big deal, and Portland found this out too, you had a lot of people moving into the condos and apartments at a transit station who never took transit. They were there for the lifestyle. They were there for the placemaking. And they were there for the 2 parking spaces to drive to work. And so what they started to do was they, and I apologize for this, but what they decided to do is if a developer came in and wanted excess parking, that there was a fee associated with that. And likewise, if you had a developer come in and figure out how to squeeze down parking and add a lot of transportation demand management, they got incentives. And that's where their traffic was coming from. So I just thought that was a very unique way of looking at TOD and answering the congestion question. So, thank you.
Nobody goes to Paris to see the parking lots.
We talked about agility and flexibility, and certainly during the planning phase, things happen. Things pop up. How do you adapt? How do you reach out? We were asked in question 6 about the recent development concerning the First Baptist Church site, and certainly that acreage will be influential as to how the downtown now looks to development. It does a couple of things. One, I think it gives us an opportunity as a design team to reach out to them and say, hey, this is what we're doing. Can you be a partner as well? Can you listen? Yeah, there may be some things going on that we may not be totally aware of, certainly, but we want to be able to adapt to their thinking and theirs to ours. How do we embrace them? How do we embrace that opportunity and really create it as an opportunity for development? Secondly, it gives you the opportunity to look for diversity in development as well. What is that acreage going to ultimately turn into? We know that Rosa Parks is going through some changes now. We know that there's some school, university thinking related to bringing that the additional younger demographic to that location. So, there's a lot of opportunity that you have to deal with, you have to be able to dance with. We're not going to be so set in stone where we say, oh, this is what you have to do. No, we have to be able to adapt. And that agility and flexibility is imperative as we look to this site as one of those, again, that can really be influential to the direction of downtown.
Let me say one thing. I think it's amazing for me to see this city in where it is with the opportunities. I really haven't seen it in any other place. If I compare Jacksonville with Austin, you can afford anything. I mean, Capital Metro would like to, or the city or the county, to be able to move forward with a lot of plans, but it's just the city is not affordable. Now, with the opportunity that you have here and this level of land available in the core and downtown, I'm not saying let's go and buy the land, but begin to talk to the ownership and look at the future and what possibilities can we begin to talk about sharing and looking at the vision of transit embedded in their projects. I think it is crucial. It is crucial to recognize that this time is critical. And I think if it is managed and the vision is shared, the results are going to be there. It takes time, but I think it is very important to recognize where Jacksonville is today.
I have one quick little snippet to add, just
Yes,
as I think about this. So we know that First Baptist Church, majority of their members come from outside of the area into the area, right? So they weren't using transit to begin with. And so one of the reasons why they made a decision to do this is because of a membership decreasing and not coming into the facility. So think about it from this perspective. 75 to 80, maybe even 90% of what comes into this area will more than likely use public transportation. If it's college students, if it's a shared hospital use for training for, again, medical tourism is something I mentioned that's very big. So any of those elements, think in any way it's a win-win for JTA, because I feel like it's going to bring more people into the area, and again, those people will in turn use more transit.
When I learned about the changes at the church, my instinct was to say, don't be alarmed. Change like this is really routine and normal in cities. The old stockyards weren't needed, so they became something else. The rail yard, like the example that you saw from Austin, can become something else. And it's routine, really, in the history of cities to expect things will change. And sometimes those changes are big in their acreage or their impact or institutional effect. A few years ago, this spot in downtown Baton Rouge, which is neighborhood sized, was full of warehouses where they stamped out the license plates for the DMV in Louisiana. And the state repositioned and reconsolidated that work, but Senator Mary Landrieu had in the meantime squeezed the proceeds from the settlement over the BP oil spill to create a new institution out of LSU and other research organizations called the Water Institute of the Gulf. So the water campus, the headquarters of the Water Institute of the Gulf, now sits where the DMV sat. We got to design that. It was really just an opportunity for the city to become more whole. So changes, big and small, happen all the time. It's normal in cities. I wouldn't be thrown by that. Now, we've come to question 7. May I just jump in there?
Absolutely.
And I'll go quickly with this, but I thought it might be fun to look at an example of what infrastructure light MOD looks like. And this is a project in Chattanooga on the riverfront in downtown. If you know the region, here are the high rises of downtown. That's the headquarters of Blue Cross Blue Shield. The riverfront on the west side for a very long time has been industrial in its use. And they were emboldened by our successful plan 20 years ago for the south side, which is a booming and successful, culturally vibrant neighborhood now, and they said, okay, come over here and do more of that on the west end. Now, their disruption didn't occur on this site. Their disruption occurred at the Fukushima nuclear plant during the tsunami and earthquake in Japan, because they used to make nuclear turbine reactor vessel, big metal things in this combustion engineering site, and that industry went away. So the jobs and the usefulness of this in its old form also left. So disruption can come from very far away. And so we looked at this and we realized that for 150 years, the people of Chattanooga have been kept away from the riverfront in this area. So it's a huge opportunity to re-knit the river to the community. And we call this Chattanooga's first 21st century car optional neighborhood. You know, like a nude beach is clothing optional. You don't have to wear one of those cars if you don't really want to as you move around. And there's transit here, and I'll show you how it connects to the idea for expanding Chattanooga's electric shuttles. But really the big idea is it's a walkable neighborhood like Lisa described. And I'll just show you some of how we got to that. Here's this piece of study area and the existing electric shuttle route in downtown Chattanooga, which they've planned for a while to extend. This project went back to the transit agency and said, why don't you adjust that map just a little bit so you can come to and through this new center of jobs and housing and ridership, and pick up those people from Blue Cross Blue Shield too, and so on. Now the work is similar to, I think, a lot of what has to happen here, because it involved a lot of small group work, not just big ones. But we started with maps and a virtually blank sheet of paper and listened a lot first, asked people what they wanted to see in that location. Tried a lot of things and said, is this what you meant? So it was a very interactive kind of process. All levels of government participated. This is the only time you'll ever see me photographed with Senator Corker, but he came to the charrette. So it wasn't just getting the attention from the people in the neighborhood, it was getting attention from outside and from funding sources. And the crowds grew as we worked on it. And so here you see we had to expand and make 2 simultaneous meetings out of one because it got bigger and bigger. And over time, the number of folks touching the plan just grew and grew. Some of what's there is actually pretty cool, like these old structures that are having all their asbestos removed and stripped to structure. Some of it is not so great, like the big chunks of asphalt, not dissimilar from the excessive number of surface parking lots, call them land banks, that we have throughout the U2C area. So here was the first sketch, just showing you the evolution process for how we think about extending the city fabric into a place. But really the site plan is like an armature, even that network of blocks and streets, like an armature around which to hang real estate development, so that you make a village by building a lot of smaller buildings, not just a smaller number of huge ones. And that's a lesson for TOD. And then we were able to get them to think not just about the numbers or the circulation, but about the place, like what kind of environmental impact it would have, what ways they could increase the sense of public ownership of the public realm. So the park system, including the Tennessee River Park along the water with the trails and so on, and the green and blue network that extends into the site became part of it. So we jumped out of maps and started storyboarding. And this is a process we let a lot of people participate in, like looking over our shoulders, big screens, things like that. So as we were sketching, they could see what we were doing, they could react to it and say, more like this, less like that. And then the visualizations got a little more advanced. So I put this here as an example of a visual approach. Michaela and I are accustomed to drawing our way out of problems. So we like to draw what it could be. This is one of the streets, and maybe relevant for our La Villa conversation. This street has low-rise townhouses on it. Not everything is tall buildings, and for not everything is city block size development, but some things are small as beautiful development. That's all part of the normal natural mix of how you make a city. These are glimpses of the concept, the small blocks, permeability. That's more important than any technology we can apply to building ridership. Thinking about how to reuse some things that are already there, like those big structures I showed you. This one is slated as the nicest, tallest one. to become an indoor-outdoor music venue. So we picked up on the cultural demand for doing something they don't presently have a place to do and said, how about we reuse this legacy structure in a creative way like that. And similarly, some parts of the old sheds will remain and arc over streets and park spaces, and buildings will come up and touch around them and so on. So why all these visuals? Because they're really, at the end, the thing we're trying to do is create a place where people want to be. I mentioned the park system a minute ago. A big idea is that the parks and squares are making addresses, not just peeling back some of the pavement, which is a really good thing to make it less impervious surfaces and better water quality, but they're making addresses that are different, distinct from one another. There's lodging, there's corporate headquarters, there's lots of housing of various types, there are existing streets repurposed and new streets added. There's always the data side. So as we draw, we gather numbers. So this is a screenshot from an interactive program we use to design neighborhoods. So as we're adding more of these little Nerf sugar cubes, the computer's counting and saying, here's how many units you've added, or how many riders you've added, how many jobs you've made space for, how many parking spaces you're going to need as we go. And so that, I mentioned that because that means you can sit with the economist beside the transportation planner, beside the real estate person, and actually think about what the annual impact of these will be. Last, how do you operationalize all this stuff? Maybe relevant as well here because it required taking the city's form-based code and creating a whole new chapter for it with the provisions designed to implement this project. That's a snapshot of that. So there were 5 things I thought, looking back on it this morning, that I thought maybe are worth raising is why we thought this example we were showing. First is infrastructure light, next generation, mobility-oriented development. The second is that it's a design-forward approach that draw our way out of our problems thing so that you can actually see what it would be like. And you can dial it up or dial it down as you react to what you see. Third, not just visioning, because that sounds like picking words. Let's retain that small town, hometown, big city feeling. I just love those words. We all got mental pictures in our minds when I said them, but all our mental pictures were different, and that's the problem. So if we draw, we can help people really visualize it. So not just visioning in the verbal sense, but making your visions visual with advanced visualization and simple sketches. While you're planning for dynamic change over time, this isn't supposed to all happen at once. It's a 25-year enterprise there. Fun was in Kentrici's early slide. And so one of the things I look back on this now and realize is that making the public engagement process interactive and swift and satisfying and fun was a big deal. It didn't drag out over a really long period of time. And then last, the innovative approach to the land development regulations. So they're results oriented instead of just having rules because you're supposed to have rules. That's a summary of a recent project within the required time. Good. And we look forward to your questions.
Okay, so of course we have gifts, treats for those of you. I'll just ask you to hold it for just a second and I'll go through the process with you. So you guys have snacks. So, here you go. And I'll save this one for Mr. Wallace later, but I'll ask you to open. Inside you'll see an iPad. Can you click on it, touch it, and make it wake up for me? So in front of you is what your ridership will see on your app. So just click it, make it go, swipe it. You see the My JTA app? Okay. So this is the future of what your ridership will see. You got to keep it alive. So you guys keep it alive with me there so you can follow through with me. So click on the My JT app. You touch your screen. Cleveland, you've gone a little farther than you should.
I was trying to keep it
That's
alive. I was trying to keep it alive.
Click to plan your route. Everybody's got to the plan your route.
First in your class.
Yes, first in class. Okay, so take a look. On here, you'll see transit routes, but you also see the green buttons. Those are like TOD areas, so you can feel free to click on any one of those. And then you see the green, and you see the U2C here. And so this is what your ridership will see, the availability to figure out where they want to shop, eat, work, or live. Hit the U2C button right there. There you go. So click on any one of those as well. You pick your route, you pick your location, and this gives you how you get to where you want to go if you're trying to go to dinner, if you're trying to go to work, if you need to go shopping. Click one more time on any of those routes or any of those buttons. This is pretty much the closing, but this is giving you an idea or concept of what your ridership will see in the future, and the enjoyability of how easy it will be for them to go from getting on whatever transit mode they decide. You're keeping that. That's yours. So you have to put it in your shirt. But this is just a unique way we wanted to give back to you guys and show you how serious we are about this and how important this is for us as well. You guys know I'm a big JTA fan, and I want to see this thing go through and be super successful. And this is just a token of our appreciation for allowing us the opportunity to come and see you guys today. And hopefully you'll understand that we're the right team for you guys, okay?
They're not going to look up the rest of our meeting.
Thank you so much.
And that's actually good, because now it's my turn to close. First of all, I want to thank all of you for the time. It's an immense privilege for me to stand before you, and also to be able to have the opportunity to lead this incredibly talented team. The tentacles of you know, the urban circulator is amazing. UTC is something that could be just absolutely transformational on so many levels, and you saw a taste of that. We obviously look forward to being a part of that, to facilitating your vision if we can. I love the opportunity to be the conductor, to be the maestro. I'm going to let the talent and the instruments of our orchestra play to their fullest volume and to their fullest ability. And where I need to pull a string and tighten or loosen, I will. But I will also under your direction and guidance. Leaders lead, managers manage. Yes, we have to manage, but I want to be the leader of this team. I want to be here for you. I dedicate myself for you. And certainly the team dedicates their time and ability and resources to you as well. Wow, 2 hours. We're a little short, but you know, we wanted you to breathe a little bit as well. So we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity on behalf of the Haskell team, on behalf of my compadres and patriots. I certainly appreciate this opportunity as well. So thank you, and we'll certainly entertain any questions that you may have.
Yeah, so
Yeah, please.
just going back, and sorry to jump around and didn't ask during
Okay.
it, but you know, in the context of U2C and the extents that we're going to with it or planning to extend it to, you know, there's these extensions. Almost all 3 of them go into these historic neighborhoods that have this sense of culture and neighborhood in all their own sense, and we are looking to kind of inject this technology into those neighborhoods. So like, I don't know how to phrase it, but is there any, have you seen any way of balancing this injection of technology into maintaining a historic culture in these neighborhoods?
That's a great question. I'm going to start with you, Cantrice, and certainly Victor.
So I think that, from my perspective, the most important thing is inclusion and understanding and reasoning. And I think that it's imperative for us to make sure that they have that level of education and understanding, because if they're not aware of what we plan on doing, they may feel as if something has been taken away from them. This was seen, quite honestly, when we did the La Villa development strategy. Although there weren't a lot of residents that lived in that neighborhood, the cultural heritage lived within the community as a whole. And so we combated that by making sure that we were very transparent and open and trustworthy and truthful with them about what our plans were. And so it was a little bit of an easier transition, I think, in a situation such as that. I'll let Victor expound.
More than half our work is in revitalization of historic districts. Some are really well along in the process, like in downtown Winter Park when we added to what they had already started, and others are really far behind, like the south side of Chattanooga or in Antigua, the 500-year-old UNESCO World Heritage Site. So we're used to realizing what's there, and the people that are there are really sensitive and maybe vulnerable to change getting out of control. So their nervousness is an absolutely justifiable instinct. I spoke about growth and change earlier, and the change is what you're describing. And I think Americans, in particular, are kind of conditioned to be suspicious of change, growth and change, especially because in many of our communities, we look around and we see the built evidence, and it kind of supports that suspicion. So rebuilding trust that growth and change can make things better rather than worse requires a patient listening process,
Right.
and listening closely, not just to the individuals that are there, which is crucial, but also to the land, to the place. If we go and we can measure it, and we know the history of it, and we can have a conversation with folks about how that building they know as the bar down the street used to be a livery stable, then they may not have even known that. If we showed them their old fire insurance maps and we say, yeah, there used to be a building on this corner where there's a parking lot now. That was here from 1875 until 1947. They get more comfortable with the idea that you can fill in the lost space and that you might do it on the neighborhood's terms. So I think it's listening to the land and to the place, and then being precise about it, somewhat scholarly about it in a way. Definitely not acting as though you brought in from out of town on a parachute the solution and you're going to come impose it, because that it will inevitably backfire.
And I forgot to address the parking question for the UTC extensions. And we talked about this as a team last night about how much vehicle parking do you put at those nodes. And for cars, you strive for 0, but that is actually where you have a good mix of other type of vehicle parking, bikes, car share, things like that, because you really want to make that node about transit, not so much about occupying that space for an individual car that's parking there for a little bit. I'd also like to point out that for some of these historic neighborhoods, like Alexandria, Virginia, they're all up in arms. It's like scooters don't fit our historic, as if cars do. But I think what we're seeing is innovation in companies. So Spin Scooters is actually working with real estate development and property managers
and city governments.
And city governments to install racks that automatically recharge to get it out of the public right of way, so that there's actually a shared pool amongst public and private entities that are hosting this new web of opportunities. And so a lot too, what you're seeing is souped up bus stops, that bus stops actually become your first mobility hubs. And all it really needs to do is having one of those like scooter stations up against a bus stop. But again, a lot of this is like when you were a kid growing sugar crystals on a string, you know, and then you wake up one day and boom, there it is. So I think that we're seeding some of these efforts that are going to grow organically at those extensions in a way that's context sensitive.
One little phrase. The most significant historical districts in the country are the ones that were able to keep their economic vitality in place.
Or bring it back even, you know. At some level, we have to listen to hear what they're saying and not listen to respond.
If you look at the spine of the various different locations for stops itself, did you take a look at that and determine if there's some cannibalization of different stops? Or are they too close? Will they actually fully develop out? Do you have to have a tiered strategy of how and when the various different development routes could move into development from this standpoint? Did you take a look at that? What would be your recommendation to them? Because to the public, everywhere you see an actual stop is an actual opportunity for, you can call it a mod or a TOD, whichever way you want to look at it. but there's also something in the real world of real estate called market absorption.
right.
So could you take a look at that, and who would lead that conversation amongst the team to the group?
Well, I think one of the important ideas that Lisa raised but didn't get time to do the whole seminar on was anticipatory planning. And there's going to be a certain amount of learning by doing as you implement this system. And because it's infrastructure flexible or light relative to, as compared to, say, a rail or a fixed guideway with big stations and so on, I think there's an opportunity to dial up and dial down with learning and experience as you grow the system. So that means you don't actually have to figure everything out in advance, that's the hardest thing for planners. It's the hardest thing for us to accept, right? The dirty little secret of city planning and transportation planning too is not everything has to be figured out ahead of time. It's good to have a scenario, but also to think, what about this alternate outcome, or this surprise? How would you respond to that surprise? And so that's why people like Lisa have been adapting scenario planning, which was common in Fortune 500 companies or in the military, but not so common in the design of cities. I think you could use that to your advantage to deal with that question. But I haven't done a market study for this exact site already in order to answer the question about feasibility in this location versus that, or whether the potential at one can cannibalize development potential or ridership potential from another. But that's a great question to throw at.
But you acknowledge that it has to be done.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, and on our team, we actually have some market specialists from RCL Code. And they're doing phenomenal work on trying to predict, for example, the effects of Uber and Lyft on the transit shed.
There might be some surprises from that analysis. So it should happen at the beginning, not
Right.
at the end.
Any other questions? In terms of your work in other cities, were the transit agencies primarily tied to the city or county governments, or were they separated as it related to the transit-oriented development? I'm just curious about that.
We all have different experience with different places and clientele, so do you want me to start?
Yeah, absolutely.
So in ours is all over the place. Like, for example, the Capital Area Transit Authority in Michigan, Lansing, in Greater Lansing, is the one thing that all those municipalities along the BRT corridor or elsewhere have in common. So they were and obviously they have this day-to-day relationship with the feds. So they were the natural place to apply for the FTA grant and lead the municipalities through the process. But it's kind of significant that they didn't overly impose themselves. They dialed it down for Meridian, which wanted less, and dialed it up for East Lansing, which wanted more. And that, so that's a case where they have an area-wide transit authority. It's not just tied to the city of Lansing, but has a bigger responsibility. Ours are varied. Metro counties like Miami-Dade County. We persuaded the mayor to combine the Department of Transportation and Public Works. So that was a big move, kind of like JTA, having joint responsibility for all the users of transportation, not just for transit. But that was in response to a question at a meeting like this one, where they said, if you wanted to grow ridership, what would you do? And I said, I'd put the person in charge of growing ridership in charge of street design, because then they would see that the tree-lined sidewalk is as important to ridership as the escalator at the station or the turnstile. And that's a hard marriage to pull off, but kind of an unusual one to be able to get the public works, engineering, and street, and really car think culture in on the transit goal, which is I think a benefit in that case. Most of our projects are not for transit agencies. They're started with city planning departments or private developers who then have to go reach the folks in your position and say, how can we be part of making the bigger picture happen with this one jigsaw puzzle piece? And I think the benefit of that, from my point of view, has been when they're not in the room, we can already guess what they're going to ask. And that's where RCLCO and the other real estate folks put the numbers to it. But we know what real life flesh and blood developers are going to ask about what works and doesn't on a given site. And usually we're there doing this planning stuff before they're on the scene. How's that different from, say, Austin or?
Well, it's
DC?
a process, and everybody has to recognize the boundaries of each one of the entities that are going to collaborate in order to be successful. Austin has gone through many headaches, but the first thing that needed to be recognized is that the transit agency doesn't own the right-of-way in many cases. We have buses running on other people's right-of-way. So even though we would like to do a lot more about transit-oriented development, we have to work with the owner of that right-of-way. And it's the city, of the county, of the state. You know, when we have state highways or right-of-way that is owned by the state. So the first thing is really work on those partnerships and consolidate, you know, the vision of what we want this city to be. And I think you guys are doing a pretty good job in doing that. There's a lot of back and forth in the negotiations, you know, because while the transit agency would like to have dedicated right-of-way for the buses to speed up during peak time, because we want our service to be reliable and compete against traffic, you know, well, there is a big part of the community that gets upset because we're giving a full lane to buses, and that's not the agency's problem, but it is the city's problem because they go and cry to the city council. So it's working on the partnerships to really create the vision. And one of the biggest criticisms in the Central Texas area, when I started, you know, developing the long-range vision plan for Project Connect Capital Metro, the biggest criticisms that we got from the community is, you guys don't work together. You don't know how to work together. You have the Texas Department of Transportation doing this, you got the county doing this, the city doing that, and Capital Metro, who knows, whatever you're doing. You gotta get together and work together. We did it, and now things are moving a little bit smooth. I mean, it's still complex, but in my opinion, is working, creating that partnership.
So Austin, Chattanooga, heard the conversations about them, examples of West Palm Beach, but in Jacksonville. Talk to us about the mental maturation of those areas because they tend to be very vehicle-centric. Okay, so, and you're introducing the new concept and get away from the real estate play of TOD itself. The mental maturation away from the vehicle to the pedestrian-friendly environment, which then allows the real estate play to be made in terms of in actual place. You got to get there first. And the time that it took to do that in order to get to where Austin is today didn't just happen just because South by Southwest took place, etc. All of that took place well in advance. All that took place well in advance in Portland, etc. So that is something that I think the group needs to take into account. Your ability to work with someone through that mental maturation, because real estate goes in cycles, and it's a 10-year cycle all times, or longer. So that mental maturation place needs to be discussed.
Absolutely. You know, we know the mentality of Jacksonville, and it's the try to get the closest parking spot to the front door. And if you have to walk a little bit, it's we don't have enough parking. So it's all about that, Andre. You're absolutely right. It's street design. It's creating the street for everyone. We've seen some of those opportunities. It's going to take some time to change. We have to look at the infrastructure, the current infrastructure of downtown as well. And you know that one-way pairs are somewhat brutal to downtowns. How do we absorb? How do we stop? How do we slow down? How do we absorb into our downtown? Again, as an urban designer, that's been the key. So that level of mentality has to change, and it takes time, and it takes successful projects. It takes courageous developers and visionary thinkers. to make that happen. We have to pair that together to ensure that we have the right atmosphere to make it happen.
So one city we didn't discuss is Charlotte, which is very vehicle-centric, but their light rail is exceeding all expectations. And one of the things they found was one of the early first important partners was the stadium and the Panthers, because that's where you gave a lot of people who are mostly drivers that first taste of transit. And so you begin to look for these certain, what's your first ride to get you used to it. Same applies to Uber and Lyft with maybe your older relatives. I know it's a sore subject with transit agencies, but how do we start to get those ride-hailing companies attached to transit and as a form of getting drunk drivers off the road? Of really supplying your entertainment districts, of getting people first, last mile. And I think we forgot to really hearken on that aspect of the planning of how do we build those, the infrastructure of first, last mile as your first infrastructure play to your stations.
I'm gonna turn it a little bit because I think actually it's an excellent question. But you know, the change starts with you guys. You are the leadership of this community. And the change starts in the policy. We cannot ask the customer to change their mind where everything that we have done policy-wise is you drive your car, you get to a beautiful parking lot, you have all this exposure. The policy that we have today, city mobility codes, allow for that. So as leaders, we have to change that. We have to change mobility codes, road codes, accessibility codes. One of the things that the city of Austin just did, and it took a lot of effort between the transit agencies, not only in the central part of Texas, but the congestion that the city of Austin has today is alarming. It is alarming. And there is not really a good solution to address it in the short term. And it needs a short-term solution. But one of the biggest impediments that we had was the policy was not the right policy. So if you really want to start creating, a pedestrian environment, well, you have to reduce the flow of cars. But if the policy doesn't do anything to do that, well, the streets are for cars. So what the city had to understand is that we couldn't resolve the local problem in downtown if we didn't address the Austin Strategic Mobility Plan. And so for the first time in the history of Austin, they went ahead and one of the policies is, in this area, in this sector, in this area, we're gonna ask for a 50-50 mobility split, mode split. Meaning 50% of this public right-of-way of the street is dedicated for single occupancy vehicles. But 50% of the right-of-way is for a multimodal solution. If we don't create the fundamentals, the policy, we can talk pretty about the pictures and everything, but as a leaders of the community, we have to take those decisions and take it to city council and take it to board and elected officials and begin to modify the way that we manage our public right. It's not going to happen just like that. Hard lesson to learn, but boy, when that passed at city council, it was just not recently, it was about 7 months ago. Major victory, because now the policy is in place. And any argument that the opposition comes, this is the code, this right away, next improvement, 50-50 model split.
We have two comments, and they both relate to the how you start and the benefit of pilots, because giving people a taste of it, I think Lisa called it, an experience, and then they say, well, that wasn't bad, I'd like to have some more of that, works with human nature, as opposed to hitting people with a map and saying, we're going to go from everything you know to this radically different setup. So the power of political leadership can't be underestimated in this. So we are lucky enough to have some clients that are in places like Boulder or Chapel Hill, where, Arlington, Virginia, where they're very progressive about these things, but most of our clients are in the Sun Belt and in places where the car's been king for a really long time. And so it taught me that it's a great idea to drop the pebble in the pond and let it ripple out slowly by doing something that's close up, personal, non-threatening because it's sufficiently small and maybe even reversible. Now, laying heavy rail tracks and extending MARTA or BART or Metro Rail or Metro, big hard thing to do that way, right? But MOD with its light infrastructure and your lightweight, electric, quiet, fun vehicles, I think it's going to be a lot less terrifying in that way. Now, my bike pen is a gift from Congressman Earl Blumenauer, who goes around passing these things out. And he's sort of a nerd. He's the co-chair of the Congressional Bike Caucus. That's an actual thing, which is amazing. And Earl rides around Capitol Hill with his little bow tie, and people say, "Oh, you must be from Portland," and he is. But he was the one in Portland that said, instead of having this big superhighway along our riverfront, we should make a riverfront park, and we should return the space to the city and spend the money on transit instead. And I think it was really important to have a champion like that. So we like to applaud Portland for the things they've succeeded in doing, but really it was people like Earl, who Congressman Blumenauer, who made that possible. So power of political leadership, can't underestimate it. In Chattanooga, you saw those examples. In the 1970s, they were reviled in the national press as the dirtiest little city in America. A Rust Belt city in a Sun Belt location. And the river was polluted and the downtown was decaying and their industries were choking the sky. So in a lot of other communities where we work, the Chamber of Commerce and the administration of the city would call a press conference to deny it, hearing a phrase like that. But they didn't do that in Chattanooga. They actually embraced it and said, "This is our wake-up call. Let's do something different." They were lucky to have a senator at the time who saw from Washington the benefit of investing in Chattanooga, and they cleaned up the river and they electrified the bus fleet and they brought back downtown back to life and turned the lights back on in all those old buildings, and then that confidence is really powerful. But they skipped the south side. So by the late 90s, they had all this good stuff over here, and the south side was really hurting, basically a smoldering ruin. And philanthropy and political leadership, because the foundations, in that case the Lyndhurst Foundation, Benwood Foundation, and the city leadership said, it's not okay to leave the south side unaddressed. This revitalization should be for everybody. And they devoted resources to it and started a kind of lot by lot, block by block effort to push back the decline. Now the south side is the success story in Chattanooga. So I think the lesson for me here is find those champions, educate them, give them the tools, the data, but also the emotional story is where the pictures are kind of crucial of what could be, and let them drop the pebble in the pond.
We got less